Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to Adventures in Networking. We are Kelly and James West. We are the founders of Only Networking, the business network for people who like people.
Yes, that is indeed us. So we're going to be chatting about our topic today. So this is online networking 2.0. Are you missing out on the opportunity? Have you noticed that online networking's changed? We're also going to talk about why online is so integral to the story of Only. That is quite a good background story there. We've got a couple of fantastic guests, Paula Wingate, Alice Fewings, both of whom have really beautifully embraced online networking. And they're going to be talking about how they've taken advantage of what online networking can bring us. Hello.
And if you'd like to appear on the show, pop a comment in the chat box or give us a question if you've got one, and we'll refer to it as we go along. And if you want to, you can even wish James a happy birthday because he is celebrating his birthday today. Happy birthday, James.
It's literally today.
It's literally happening. Well, about 2 o'clock it'll start, won't it?
2 o'clock. Me and Noel Gallagher.
You and Noel Gallagher, yeah.
Well, company. I'd have his eyebrow if I let that. Anyway. Okay, let's move on to the topic. So, online networking 2.0. Are you missing out on the online advantage? That's what our official title is today. I think why 2.0? Because I still think people are a little bit. Online networking was possible pre-COVID. 2020. I had to look it up. 2020. Yeah. Remember, there was all talk of the roaring 20s, and this is what that didn't work, did it?
No.
So 2020 pandemic. Before that, you could do online networking. We were doing online networking. Mm-hmm. But that was really the point that it kicked off. And I think there are a lot of people that maybe had an early experience with it. They might have even persisted with it for a while, but maybe not cottoned on to the fact that that was version 1.0, and 1.0 is always massively flawed. We were a little bit different, and I'll come on to that in a minute, but it's opened up, Kelly, hasn't it, massively? I think we've seen in the last year or so that we're having less conversations about what works better, online or in person. It's kind of irrelevant. There's a place for both of them, isn't there? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I got really tired of that conversation. And I don't think we've probably had to have it much this year at all. We say this all the time, you'll have a preference and that's fine, but really good networkers will do both, and they'll utilise the ability to access local community in person and a wider network online. So as you say, I don't think that's the question anymore. But I think what we have seen is there was a huge abundance of groups that just popped up. Some massively valued the platforms that they were creating very early on, and like us, went all into it and decided, okay, this is the way forward and this is how we want our future to be. We've just got to bring people along that want to come on that journey with us. And others didn't value it as much, so they saw it a bit more of a stopgap, and it'll kind of do until we can get back to doing that thing that we really want to do. But I think enough time has gone by now that there is no doubt that online networking is the future. That's not to say that there isn't a space for in-person, because of course there always will be. But I don't think the in-person events have as much room for adaptation, scalability for new things to happen, whereas online certainly does. New technologies, different formats, moving into different regions, cross countries and different borders, that sort of thing. So I think the future of online networking is really exciting, and we're probably 1.1, probably not even 2.0. There's a lot to go yet, isn't there?
Don't undermine my topic already.
That's what I'm here for.
We're not going to go into that whole thing of online versus in person, because I just don't think it gets you anywhere. I know there's certain people that have absolutely made their mind up. Networking only works as an in-person thing. I'm not going to argue with that if that's correct for you. I think what we need to do as an online network is talk about why have we fully embraced it. We don't have an in-person component anymore. What are the upsides? What are the advantages? So we will come on to that. But first, I haven't done this yet. You've probably noticed at the top of the screen, I can't work out where to point. It's over there. Pipe Drive, the fantastic people at Pipe Drive. they've partnered with us. They are sponsoring us. They are supporting this show. So if you don't know Pipedrive, sales first customer relationship management software, specifically helping small businesses grow. It's partly why we love it, because it's a reasonably simple, there's a lot of clarity in it. CRM so important, I think, for stitching together what we're doing in terms of online networking. LinkedIn, which we're going to get Alice to talk about, or we'll talk about as a topic later. But to stitch that together, how do you make a coherent sales process pipeline? Because ultimately we all need to sell. So we're super pleased to have those guys supporting the show. We're going to talk a little bit more about those later, but there is already an offer. We've got an affiliate link. If you want to sign up, you can get 30-day free trial of Pipedrive. And also there's a 20% off your first year offer, which runs monthly as well, by the way, if you just want to do it as a monthly. So we'll come back to that later. But so back to this online networking 2.0. I'm just going to tell the story, Kelly, of the fact that we did online networking before COVID, which was unusual. It's actually built into the name of Only. Only stands for online networking live experiences, because we had this idea, didn't we, Kelly, when we met at in-person networking, that in-person networking is great. We built our businesses off the back of it. But why have we got this situation where we're spending all this time online? We're spending all this time online, in-person networking. Couldn't we combine the two? Couldn't we get the intimacy and the kind of familiarity and getting to know each other that we get in person? And can't we combine that with the reach, the scale, the efficiency of what we're seeing online? I go back to when I was doing in-person networking. A lot of people I was meeting, I wasn't even adding them on LinkedIn, because there wasn't such a clear connection. And we thought, there's got to be a way, isn't there? But so we started trialing, didn't we? I think it was 18 months before COVID, Kelly, didn't we? Yeah. How did that go down?
Bit like a lead balloon.
It wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't that bad. But I think the people that came on board at that space came to support us rather than to support the concept of what we were trying to create. So I can remember we had a member in Dubai, Spain, a couple in America. So in terms of it being quite a diverse group, it was fantastic. But it did feel like extremely close connections, wanting to help support each other rather than trying to build a bigger network and to sort of scale. I think people saw it as quite throwaway. It was sort of a nice thing to do, but not really something that anybody saw that much value in. I think that would be my first sort of thoughts of what it was like back then.
Yeah, I think I can vividly remember people saying, yeah, good, I like the idea of it, but no thanks. It's never going to be an able replacement and enable us to build the depth that we need in order to unlock the potential of networking. So you're right. We couldn't really get people to buy into it. It was very much a novelty and early days. The good thing was, the advantage that it gave us is that we spent 18 months working on the format. So we knew Zoom inside out. Exactly. We kind of knew the format. We brought in breakout rooms live into the meeting, which was a really big benefit that we didn't really do as in-person networking, because you could do that super efficiently. So we had a massive head start, didn't we, Kelly? Can you remember the day we went into lockdown and you were seeing announcements from other networks going, oh, we're just going to temporarily move online? And we were getting reports from networks that were saying to their leaders, right, just go and do it on Zoom. Oh, well, good luck with that, because it wasn't easy, was it? There was a learning curve.
I think even now, we're very lucky. We've got lots of, real avid supporters, friends that are in the network that have been with us for years, and they'll all agree it isn't easy. So if you're an attendee of a regular network and you take it for granted, I'd seriously sit back and just think about it for a second. There is an awful lot of thought that goes into the meetings. It's an awful lot of energy that's needed to, we've all been to meetings that are a bit flat sometimes. And if you're the facilitator or organizer of that event, whether it's only BNI, wherever you go, it doesn't matter. That's hard to keep up momentum when you've got a lot of people in the room. So I think on the outside, it looks like it's easy. It's really easy. Just, stick it on Zoom, on Remo, wherever you want to do, and off we go. And I think going back to my earlier point of lots of different networks kind of popping up at the beginning of pandemic, we've seen a lot of decline in that, and a lot of networks that have kind of wound down or gone back to in person, or have, you know, for whatever reason, there aren't that many that have kind of stood the test of time. So I think when we're talking about this online networking 2.0 version, we are looking at those networks that are still here and are looking to adapt and go with future, see what we can model. Yeah.
Let's colour this in a little bit. So we talk about 2.0 as a kind of new way of adopting networking, doing it differently. How have you were a prolific networker. If people don't know, Kelly used to get 73% of her business from a very small networking group because she networked correctly. How have you adjusted to the online version of networking? What's different? What's the same?
What is different? What's so probably easier to say what is the same, first of all. I've never taken it for granted. So I act the same way in person as I would do online. Other way around. I act the same online as I would have done in person. If I'm talking to somebody, they've got my full attention. I'm not off in the background doing something else. I'm talking to a human being at the end of the day, and we get a bit annoyed sometimes, don't we? And in real life, well, this is real life. This is happening. So for me, being online makes zero difference as it being in person. If you've got the intention of being at an event, if you have the intention of starting a relationship, a conversation, building a connection, you give it your all and you give it 100%, and that shouldn't matter which medium you're using. I think what's different, I'm much better at being able to track where those conversations go, at what status they are. I'm never come off of a call meeting somebody without saying I'm going to introduce them to at least 2 or 3 people, and I can track that much better now with systems like Pipedrive. You know, the technology that we have now that enables us to be able to do that. For me personally, being online, I can have the Zoom window open, I can have LinkedIn open, and I can have my CRM open, and I can cross-purpose all of that information so that by the time I come off of the call, my to-do list isn't really anything, because I can do all of that good stuff while I'm talking to the person. And actually that's something I've adapted in the last couple of months. I'm a real giver, I'm a people pleaser, and I want to talk to as many people as I can, and I want to be able to help them, I want to be able to support them, but I end up with a huge to-do list. And there is a space in online that means if you are that type of person, your volume of connections is so much greater, so you end up with a bigger to-do list. So what I've tried to do in the last couple of months, and Brian Hilliard, our US operations director, we talked about this. If you're on a call with somebody and you're saying, I'll introduce you to so-and-so, do it there and then. Don't add it to your to-do list to come off the call and forget about later on, because that you're doing something for that person you're talking to. They are not going to worry if you're going to just spend a minute doing an introductory message on LinkedIn or email or whatever it is. So I think the way I've adapted is got very busy, got very overwhelmed, got inundated with volume of connections and probably lost sight of some of those, to then kind of calming down a bit, probably a year ago, going, okay, well, this is the future now. So how is this going to be sustainable? So which software am I using? Which connections do I want to keep in contact with? And how am I going to monitor those relationships?
Definitely. We're going to talk about that. I think the people that say, oh, it's a bit online networking is a bit throwaway, you know, because it isn't the kind of connection that you get in person. I believe, and I've seen this, you know, many examples. We'll bring Alice on in a second to get her view, but it's only throwaway if you treat it as a throwaway. You know, like you're saying, Kelly, if you're not engaged with the screen, if you're not doing any follow-up activity, if you're just turning up, saying your piece, leaving, it's the same as going to an in-person network, not really talking to anyone, throwing your card up in the air, leaving. Like, that's throwaway. Online throwaway if you don't get involved. There's actually no difference. It's what you do with the medium that makes the difference, isn't it?
Yeah, and it also depends on the situation or the scenario, the environment that you are in at that point of time, isn't it? You know, I was on a networking event this morning, Callan Nicholson's Roundtable, and met somebody that I'd met for the first time, and I talked about the fact we'd just come back from Ibiza, and he said, oh, I love Ibiza. I stayed in Ibiza Rocks. Well, we went to Ibiza Rocks while we were there. And I said, oh, yeah, we went to see Craig David. He'd gone to see Craig David too. We didn't talk about work at all. But we built a really good connection and a really good rapport. And I'll tell you now, I want to have another conversation with him because we actually listened to each other. We had something in common and we had a shared experience. That's not to be sniffed at. That's quite hard to do.
Coffee. Yeah, that's the getting coffee moment, isn't it? I think people that go to in person and find it easy to build rapport, I call them the getting the coffee moments, where you're not pitching, you're not even networking, you're just there as a human being. And that's when those kind of open conversations happen. And in my experience, that was always the bit where it tipped away from being you're a professional connection to becoming, I'm getting to know you, I'm getting to know you as a person. And once I get to know you as a person, that might be the point where down the line I'll refer you.
Well, this probably ties in because not only is networking at 2.0, small business owner working in general is version whatever 2.0, 3.0, wherever we are. And I think we are also far out of, the home working cycle, and we're in a good space and we're all settled into where we are. But we do work differently. We see these patterns, don't we? Around bank holiday this weekend, people are slower to come back into work as they would have been maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So I think you've got to realise that networking has changed, but part of that is because the way that we work has changed and the way that we value our work and we value our relationships has changed. It'll be interesting to hear from Alice in a minute, but I hear lots of people who don't like to see personal things on LinkedIn, but I would say that's calmed down massively in the last year. I think that's way more acceptable to see that. Whether you like it or not is another thing, but it's that real split between why I am working, but this is also my personal life and I've got to enjoy what I'm doing, and I need to be around people that I enjoy being around because that's really important too.
Right. Excellent. Right, we keep previewing that Alice is going to come on, but there is one more thing. We do have to talk a little bit about Pipedrive because we want to talk about Pipe. It's interesting, isn't it? Even this conversation, Kelly, we've kind of touched on the importance of having a system to stop you getting lost. Like you said, volume of connection, dead easy these days. What do I actually do with that information? So if you don't know about Pipedrive, they're partnering with the show, supporting the show. It's a sales first CRM. They call it an intelligent revenue platform. Revenue is the key word there, isn't it? Supports the growth of small businesses with easy to use and effective tools. We really like it because it's visually attractive. The interface is really clean and it just gives you a really visual way to track your leads and communications as well, because it's never a one and done thing. There's automated reminders and follow-ups. It eliminates loads of repetitive tasks. And because nothing is missed, more deals are made. Look, once you've seen it in action, you'll see it becomes clear that it's been designed by salespeople for salespeople. Kelly, you've got a
they've already earned 6 industry awards this year alone, and Pipedrive customers on average get 28% more deals in their first year. So thanks to the partnership, as you've said, James, viewers can actually try Pipedrive for free for 30 days plus. You can get 20% off your Pipedrive subscription if you choose to sign up, and the links will be in the chat box there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Pipedrive. Thanks for your support. Right, definitely now. I'm not even going to do a big preamble because I feel like we've been talking about her for hours. Alice Fewings, how are you, Alice?
I'm very well. Let's start by saying happy birthday, James. I didn't know it was your birthday.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alice. You're very kind. If you don't know Alice, where have you been? If you're on LinkedIn and you don't know Alice, where have you been? She's a digital visibility and LinkedIn trainer. She's one of the best people that we know. She's also was a person, I think I can say this, that was really ready for online networking. So quite ahead of the curve in terms of what you offer as a service and stuff. So do you mind just telling us a little bit about that background, Alice, networking into online networking for you?
Yes. Okay. So my first experience of networking was, so I launched my business in 2018 and I've come from corporate world. So literally didn't know anything about the business community, anything like that. Obviously had a background in LinkedIn, but I wasn't a part of that community. So I Googled BNI. It was the only thing I knew of at the time, was like networking groups. I went along to my local one. I'm based in Portsmouth. And it was such a welcoming group. I really enjoyed it as like a first experience. But I mean, I laugh at it now, although I think I did do the right thing back in the day. I was like proper suited and booted. I had a whole outfit. I'd memorized my 60-second pitch, but I definitely thought I was selling to the room. And I think that's the bit that massively changed when we got to kind of online networking, because that's all I knew was the people in the room, and didn't really appreciate that they had their own business networks as well. I really needed work, and I started my business, and that's kind of what I was doing. Then of course it was me growing my own LinkedIn community. And I'll be honest, when the pandemic happened, obviously horrific for the world and for what it was, but in terms of business, it was kind of like, you know, it opened up a lot of doors, let's put it that way. And for me, I had a business that was already online, but all of my customers were in person. And I was really struggling because I was struggling to know what different networking groups to go to. I felt like I'd gone to all the ones locally. I'd been in business then for 2 years. I was having to drive further, which was then taking up a lot more time, more expense. I still remember now there was a client who I was just kind of, I guess it would now be a short discovery call over Zoom, but it then was face to face. And I drove all the way to Bournemouth just to have a conversation with somebody for like 10 minutes and then drove home again. And so all of that's now massively changed to the benefit, I guess, for a lot of us, but certainly for my business. And so now, through the power of only online networking, LinkedIn, I can work with anybody anywhere in the world. And that's been the biggest transformation for my business. So, yeah.
Love that. Love that. I'm going to just mention Paula because she is backstage, Paula Wingate. I don't just want to slam her onto the screen without any announcement. So we've got another guest today, the fantastic Paula Wingate. I'm going to bring her on now. So still yourself. There she is.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Hello. Happy birthday.
Fantastic. I know you've also rushed to get here today, so we really appreciate it. So audience, if you don't know Paula, Influential Minds is her business. She's a business and mindset coach. She's an ex-footballer, professional footballer. She's amazing. We're very glad to have her. Paula, do you mind, we're talking about this, you're a very experienced BNI person like we were. You did a lot of BNI. You did really well in that world. What's your version of how you adapted to online networking? Was it a reasonably easy adjustment to you? Tell us that story.
It's so funny when I was listening to Alice there in the back, and I so related to everything what she said there. I was quite lucky because when I worked with Action Coach, like, was it 2016 time, we used to do a lot of coaching on Zoom. So I was already used to that. But what I didn't expect to happen to me was burnout from the online virtual stuff, especially with BNI at the time. And I was a DC, so director consultant. So it wasn't something that I expected because I knew what was happening at BNI. I knew what to do. But I was like, I need to get away from networking for a bit. But that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because then I actually really appreciated how to network, how to engage, how to build up long-term relationships, how to work the room, how to be genuine. And instead of going with the fake side of it, and I thought, this has been the best change ever for me. But it took me a good couple of years to get myself out of the burnout from what I think happened in the real world of, like what Alice was saying, traveling, speaking to people, because I even got an opportunity to speak to somebody in Edinburgh, and I was poorly once, and I was like, look, can we just do it over Zoom? And like, no. And that was in 2019. It was like, what is that? No. Now it's like, yeah, of course you can, Paula. Absolutely. Do that. So answer your question, it was a burnout, but then I was like, observed my burnout and then realized actually you've been an idiot. This is what you can do now.
So the online, because you can burn yourself, you've mentioned there, you can burn out by doing too much online networking, can't you? So this is a question to both of you, and Kelly, you might have a view on this as well, but how do you find that balance between being involved with a network, and we are talking specifically online, because you have to be involved, you have to be present, don't you? But how do you stop it becoming an overwhelm of, I've just got too many contacts, too much follow-up to do? Paula, if you want to go first.
It's now, I always do the 20%. What's the top 20% of my tasks that bring in my 80% of revenue in? And then I'll be like, what's the top 20% of my network that will bring in 80% of my revenue in? And actually, what's the top 20% of my happy network that will help me bring my 80% in? Because there's no point going to a networking group and it's not your tribe. And you don't enjoy it and you don't buzz from it. And you just think, oh, I daren't say that, or I daren't be the real me. I mean, I daren't turn up in my red socks in case, you know, I'm come out of the box of conformity type of thing. So for me, that's how I now think. So it's really important that I get on with people that's in the room. And to be fair, they're like me. So whoever I attract, whoever I talk to, I attract. And the same thing, whether they talk to, they attract. So it's actually the average of the 5 people you hang about with as well is very important to me. So when I walk into a room, a virtual or outside, I'll be like, right, is this, how do these compare with my average 5?
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Alice, what about you? How do you keep the balance?
Yeah. So I was resonating with so much that Paula was saying then. So I think for me, in 2020, when kind of online networking became a thing, I signed up to all the different online networking groups, and I was making my way around lots of different ones. And I think just like Paula was saying then, you've got to find the one where you feel like your tribe are there, your community's there. And for me, that was I felt very much like at home in the community. But it's the same like on LinkedIn. Obviously, I'm going to talk about LinkedIn, but I think, you connect with people and you talk to people on your newsfeed with the people that resonate with you, with that content that resonates with you. And it's the same thing with networking. You've got to find the group where you feel at home, that you can be you, that you can talk about more than just business. Yeah, I think that's the important bit for keeping it without burnout. And then you can focus it on that one group rather than trying to be all things to everybody.
Definitely. Alice, let's talk about LinkedIn, because it's impossible, I think, to talk about online networking without talking about how LinkedIn has changed. Because I can remember when it was almost like it was quite dull. It was mostly people kind of broadcasting messages about, I've got this knowledge. And it was also very much a kind of job seeker type platform, partly why I didn't use it as a business owner much. I feel like pre-lockdown. What changed in your mind to kind of bring online networking and LinkedIn as a kind of overlap, bring them together?
Yeah, you're right. So I think almost LinkedIn was first designed to be a recruitment tool rather than it being business community. That came later. I remember it pre-lockdown, and it definitely had the business community feel there, but not everybody was on board with it or doing it consistently or looking in all the time. And I think when the pandemic happened, LinkedIn said they saw a 2,400% increase in the amount of people, the activity going on the platform. So just like online networking groups, when people couldn't meet people face to face like they would normally do, they inevitably went to LinkedIn. And then I guess because of how the pandemic wasn't over very quickly and it did last a long time, it meant people stayed on LinkedIn. I think if it had been like we all thought it would be right at the beginning, a 2-week thing and then it would be over, I think then people probably would have left LinkedIn and it had been a very temporary thing. But it became people's way of life to do business, to keep checking in with everybody. And we're all human beings that have used other social media platforms probably as well. And I think we then just, if we don't know how to do something, we just bring the tactics that we know on other platforms. And that's, I think, where the more connection, I call them connection-based content, the ones that feel a bit more personal, a bit more vulnerable, or behind the scenes, giving you a window into the life of the business, they're the ones that then started to come out a lot more. And Kelly was saying right at the beginning that people often, for a long time, it feels too much like Facebook now. And I think two things have happened. One is LinkedIn changed their algorithm. So they actually made a statement saying they didn't want to prioritize that content. But two, they still said it was important to have authenticity on the platform so that we could build those authentic relationships. And so for me, it's just always been about contextualizing what the content is that you're putting on LinkedIn. So it's not about saying, I've just had a lovely Sunday roast. That has no relevance to the business community. But if you want to talk about having had a busy business week and like these are the things you've done and you're having a lovely relaxing weekend with your family because you're taking a break, that's all contextualized to suit that platform. And that's where I think people have started to do that. And so then we can build those really great relationships with people.
I'm going to ask Kelly and Paula that, what do you do to stitch together the online meetings? But I think, what platforms do you use and how do you go about it? So just have a think about that for a second. I think there's a really simple rule that applies to LinkedIn and networking, because there's broadly two ways to approach those platforms, Alice. If we think of networking as a platform and LinkedIn as a platform, you either go in as a broadcaster. I'm going to broadcast my pitch. I'm going to broadcast content. And it's the most common thing that we get asked, what do I write on social media that's going to get more attention? It's still the number one thing that people stress about. But if you think about that, all you're doing is broadcasting. Doesn't work at networking, doesn't work, in my opinion, on LinkedIn. Whereas the other approach is use it as a continuation of the conversation. So all I'm doing each time I go to a networking event or each time I go on LinkedIn, I'm just continuing that conversation that started at one point, and all I'm doing is adding to that, because there's that saying, isn't there, that no relationship is built on one conversation. So if you treat networking and LinkedIn as a continuation of an ongoing conversation, that's when you start to get results, Alice, isn't it? Or you can tell me that I'm talking nonsense. I don't mind.
No, absolutely that. I think if you see LinkedIn as a broadcast channel, you won't get anything out of it, because it's all about you and not about the people that you're there to meet. And I always say to people, if they're worried about LinkedIn, if you do networking, whether it's in person or online, all of the things you do for that, just do that on LinkedIn. So you put time in your diary for it, you go along, you probably listen more than you talk. You do also talk about yourself, not just your business. You do also talk about your business. You follow up with people afterwards. All of that you do on LinkedIn. You need to make the time for it. You need to show up. You need to listen and talk to other people more than you talk about yourself. You need to talk about things that aren't just business related. And you need to follow up with people and have a conversation. So if you want to use LinkedIn to build relationships, just like you would do with networking, then it's brilliant. And when you then combine the two, that's where the magic happens, I think.
Definitely. And that goes back, I think, to that meeting around getting a coffee thing, isn't it? That you're stitching together the relationship. Kelly, Paula, any views on what you do to stitch together networking using other tools, if not LinkedIn? Who wants to volunteer?
Kelly, I'll let you go first.
Oh, yeah, look at that. Yeah, I got loads of thoughts going on in my head. I want to come back to Paula talking about learning to be genuine, because I think that is key to a lot of behaviour or lack of behaviour that I particularly see in networking. So maybe we'll come back to that in a minute. But for me, it's just about the consistency. Like, there's nothing worse, is there, than meeting somebody at a networking event, going onto LinkedIn, seeing a picture and going, is that the person I spoke to today? Oh, I think it might be, and we joke about that, but that still happens, and it blows my mind. It also blows my mind the amount of networkers that I meet that have a Gmail account, maybe don't have a website, and there's nothing wrong with that because it all takes time, but then don't also have a LinkedIn profile, or will say, I don't really use LinkedIn, just drop me a message on Instagram or something. And I just think, if you want networking to work for you, you've got to play the game. And absolutely, as Alice is saying, and you're right, Alice, the same behaviours in both spaces. They're marketing platforms. You're marketing yourself in both of those areas. And if you can't keep that cohesion and consistency across both, I think that's when you'll then come into trouble, because people see through that stuff. And going back to the genuine point, we want to work with genuine people. We want to work with people that do make us feel good and we enjoy being around. When these ladies come into the room, they make me smile. Why wouldn't I want to be in a room with them? Do you know? Oh, and you do as well, of course, James. Just in a room with you a lot more often. That was bad, wasn't it, on your birthday? Sorry about that. You all make me smile, but that's the point, isn't it? I mean, I don't care what's going to happen in the next hour. I know it's going to be good because you guys are there, and that's how you want to feel, isn't it?
Definitely. Paula, you got anything? What's your sort of workflow for connecting, networking, and building out those relationships?
So my thought is not about getting a sale, but getting a long-term relationship. So I'm hunting for my tribe, not a sale, if that makes sense. And Alice might not agree with me here, but I don't play the algorithm game either, because if my belief is if I put a message out there, that message has come from somewhere, whether it's universe or wherever you think, and it's destined for someone. So put it out there. And that's how I see my LinkedIn. Combine it with my networking. The biggest thing I always want to turn up as is helping people to feel mega amazing about themselves. First of all, because we've got so much strength, so much magic, so much power about ourselves. We don't see it. But for someone to say and point it out to them, the biggest smile on their face, it could make their day, year, or, get them a contract. You never know. And also not being fake, because you can sniff it from a mile away. And if someone's fake, I either see it as insecure or there's something not right, or are they being, is the suspicious behind them? And trust is massive to me. So if you've got the balls to be unapologetic, authentic self, you will always have a seat at my table, because that you've got the balls to do that in front of, people that are trying to be different, to match the conformity in the room. If you stand out and be yourself, any day I'll give you contracts.
Love that.
I love that.
Love that. What doors does it open for you, Paula, as a networker moving online? Give us some examples, whether it be the type of person that you're speaking to or the geography. What difference has it made to you, online networking?
Well, only, for example, is massive, like being global, being able to speak to people in America and getting, picking their brains in the coaching world, etc., is being massive, because it grows you as a person and your knowledge, etc. So that's the biggest thing. But the biggest thing as well is there's 7.7 billion people in the world, and I just get access to 10% of them. Then that's incredible impact. If that makes sense. And that's how I see virtual online network. It helps me reach them with my message in the world, and vice versa with everyone else.
It's a balance, isn't it? Because I do think, if it's easy to make that comparison and say, if I go to an in-person network, I'm only going to meet 25, 30 people, compared to online, where it's an almost unlimited cap to the number of people you meet. And that's true, but there's also got to be quality in the relationship build, isn't it? Because we could just sit on LinkedIn and just keep hitting the connect button and nothing happens. So it's about getting that balance, isn't it? Alice, what's it been like for you, the range of online? What's it actually done for your business?
Oh, my business completely transformed with online networking, and the mixture of after networking, following up with those people on LinkedIn, keeping that relationship going. Because what we often find is obviously you're in a group and you meet once a month. So what if you only go to those meetings? If you go to every single one, that's 12 in a year. So what's happening in the meantime? And it takes a while to build up relationships, and that's where I think LinkedIn can really help to plug the gap. But for me, I was just even thinking about this in the last month. So from relationships that I've built through online networking, so this was not sales to the people in the room. They've referred me on when someone just came up in conversation. Oh, we're really looking to, do better on LinkedIn. Do you know anybody? And 2 contracts, one of them then into another 2. And I've worked with, just last month, four companies across 4 continents. Wow. So that's the power of being online and through the relationships built through online networking, and having that attitude of I'm not trying to sell to the people in the room. I'm just trying to build relationships. One of those original 2 was an only member. So, it happens. It does. And then it's amazing.
Goosebumps. I got goosebumps then. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
But yeah, and this is one of those things. You've got the energy, you've got the personality, you've got the likability for somebody to want to reach out to you when the situation arises. And that's something that you can't necessarily teach in networking. We can teach networking skills and all of that, but we can't teach the energy and the personality that you need to bring. But I think what you're both saying there is just so important. The only one thing I think is important to add, when we talk about the volume of connections, it's undoubted that online is endless. Yeah, we can reach as many people as we want to, but we have to be realistic as to how much of that we can keep our arms around. And I know that's why lots of people get overwhelmed, burned out. Like, there's just too many people, there's too many opportunities. And I think all I would say in that is that's looking at your own boundaries and not over-promising. I was there. I've been there, probably even last year, over-promising and then having to under-deliver because I couldn't keep it all in my head or on a piece of paper long enough to be able to fulfill all that. And what you have to remember is, if you're busy and you're going to your networking group, don't ask for loads of one-to-ones. Don't offer loads of introductions. Just be present and keep your energy flowing and be there and be supportive, but don't over-promise when you're too busy to actually give out what it is you're saying you're going to do. And as long as you're mindful of that, you manage to keep that to a really nice balance. And
the word energy keeps coming up, doesn't it? And I think there's a tendency to think, oh, that's a bit woo-hoo in business terms. But there is you can observe this yourself when you go to meetings. And I think this is one of the points about this version 1.0 of online networking. If you went in the early days, or you went to a network that wasn't maybe doing it that well, and remember, there's even micro transactions happening within those networks. So you can go to BNI, for example, and some groups are great and some are not as good. You probably feel this in Only on occasion. What I'm getting at there is that if you go to an online networking event and your energy is poor because you're expecting it to not be very good, and you see these people at I'll give it a go, but I don't really believe in it. And I kind of sit there looking a bit, sort of questioning and not particularly engaged. I'm kind of willing this to go wrong because I've already decided that it's not going to work very well. How does that come across? Yeah. And I think that's what you're saying, Kelly. You can't teach it, but you can be aware of it. And if you bring an energy like an Alice, like a Paula, where you're, and by the way, you don't have to be gregarious and loud and shouty and happy clappy, because like Paula's saying, if that's not you, that will look fake. If you are that person, then great. But what's wrong with being a really good listener? If you're a quieter person, I'll tell you what, because no one ever complains about someone who, that person I spoke to, they ask a lot of questions and they listened a lot. Like, no one's ever going to complain about that, are they? So do be aware, if you've been burnt in the past, that you've got to try and come onto this thing with an open mind and bring your version of a positive energy. You're lucky, Kelly. You just do this naturally.
And I'm really nosy and I just like finding out about people. Yeah, no, I do. And people ask me all the time. I would imagine Paula and Alice are in the same boat here. I just find it really easy to talk to people. There's not really anything I don't feel comfortable talking about. I'm a really good listener. I'm happy to give people that time. I don't even get that fed up when I'm talking to somebody that doesn't ask me a question anymore, because I'm kind of used to it to a degree. I think if you're happy for half an hour chatting to me, that's great. That's ticking the box for me. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you've forgotten to ask me a question.
Often those people come out as big supporters of you because they think, I've had a great conversation because I had the chance to speak. That person showed interest. Alice, what's your take on the energy that you bring to online networking? Do you actually come up before the call, or you sat there crying and unhappy and then you just somehow light up?
No, I usually am all right if I'm smiling. It does make a huge difference. And I think sometimes, and I say this about people if they're worried about content, like look back on the newsfeed of what you like. And the same goes for like online networking. When you've got all the people that is on your Zoom screen, which ones do you like gravitate towards? Is it the ones you can barely see their face because they're sat in like a pitch black room, the ones that don't talk to you, the ones that don't listen, speak, really boring, I'm just, that kind of like really monotone? Or I was in a group once where there was a couple of people that had the same job title. And so one went first and did their kind of introduction. And then the second person just went, I do what they do. I was like, oh, but you just missed the trick. Like, it's not about job titles. It's about finding the right person that you can bond with and gel with and make that connection with. So for me, energy does make a big difference. I'm not like the biggest extrovert. In fact, I'm probably, which way? I'm an introvert, but can be extroverted, if that makes sense. So I'm definitely a people person. I really like talking to people. But yeah, I definitely have to refill my social batteries all the time. But I just think it's really important to kind of come on, it's being authentic, definitely, but also thinking about how it's coming across. Just like I said, that very first BNI that I went to, I think it was right that I kind of stuck a bit for that meeting, because that's the impression I wanted to give in that moment. And I think it's the same. We can often think, oh, I'm at home, so I don't have to dress up. But it's, what does it look like on the screen? How are we coming across? Because that is the way that we build relationships now. So, yeah.
Kate,
and it's important how we feel as well. Sorry, James. But just on that point, it makes you feel better as well, doesn't it? So if you're feeling better because you're dressed nicely and you're in a good environment, that's going to come across too. Sorry, James, butted in there.
No, not at all. There is, I think, another thing that if you've not really got into online networking since the first incarnation of it, the version 1, what you might not be aware of is how it's changed. And I will say this very definitively, the profile of people that come networking. Because let's face it, in-person networking favoured a certain personality type. Sometimes, not always, but typically it's more of the extroverted people that are happy with small talk. This is a bit of a generalisation, but if you look at online networking, I have a lot of conversations with people that were excluded from networking pre-online because location, they were too remote, circumstances, they've got young kids or they have to care for someone, neurodiversity. I mean, Alice, you've touched upon the kind of introvert side. What you might not have realised is that even though they might not be the people that you naturally gravitate towards, in online networking is bringing in a whole new set of businesses to networking that previously felt excluded or didn't enjoy it. So, Paula, have you noticed that you're getting into conversations with people that maybe wouldn't have done networking before?
No, not really. But I've noticed that I get more conversations with people I might not have been getting access to before. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, for example, if I'm based in Glasgow, I might not be able to get access to people in London. But now I do. Remotely wise, I mean, the Highlands, Inverness, etc. I've always had a chat with them before, but it's never stood out more than the people in London, Liverpool, Manchester, even beyond that in New York, etc.
Okay. Kelly, have you noticed a difference? Different people? Or is it more the job? Perhaps I'm over-egging it.
No, because of the volume of people I speak to. Yeah, I again, broad statement. I would say I speak to more introverted people than I ever have done before, because I think the platform's given them a bit of security. If I'm an ambivert, weirdly, I thought I would have been an extrovert, but I'm not. I'm an ambivert. Be different, I suppose. And I can kind of understand that, but I do get that. For me, I like having the safety of being in my own environment. It makes me feel comfortable to talk openly and freely. And there literally is nothing I won't talk about. And I kind of get that sense from other people as well. I think being a people person, same as these ladies, people share a lot of stuff with me very quickly, which is awesome because you've obviously got that trust straight away. But I've definitely had more of that since being online than I would have done being in person. But there's probably an element of that is when you're in person and you go off to little breakout sessions and have conversations, people can still hear you. You know, they are just on the next table, or you're aware of people walking around, and you're not going to have such an intimate conversation as you would do one-to-one on a screen because the environment just doesn't lend itself to that. So, yeah, I would agree with that.
I suppose that's the point, isn't it? That, you know, we still speak to quite a lot of people, Kelly, don't we, that say, yeah, but in person, I prefer it. You build the depth in the relationship and you you kind of shortcut that process. I think it's really important for those people, yes, that may be your preference, but there are a lot of people that do not agree with that. I was that person, but now I actually find it easier to have one-to-one conversations online because there isn't all this external distraction. If I'm in an in-person thing, Kelly, you know this, every time we go to an in-person thing, we end up probably speaking to 2 or 3 people that are kind of quite forward, that really want to speak to us. Whereas when we're online, you tend to find that there's more space for the people that don't perhaps gravitate towards us. So again, I think it's just realizing that, just because you've got a certain preference, there's a different, they're not always different people online, but there are people that maybe don't go to in-person networks. They could become customers, they could become referrers or friends, which in itself is really important too.
It's getting to that trust piece as quickly as you can, isn't it? And absolutely agreeing with Paula and Alice on that. Your point of going networking is to build connections, relationships, friendships before anything else. It should be. Yeah. If you're a florist and you're going to B&I, you're going to get business. Doesn't really matter if people like you or, because I need some flowers for my mum because it's her birthday tomorrow, so you've got something that can be easily sold. But if you're a service provider and you need to really build connection and trust, I'd say, particularly financial services, if you're a financial planner, you've got to really know people, and that's quite an intimate thing. That takes time and effort and energy. So you go to a network to find your tribe, to feel comfortable, and then to see what that brings through long term.
Definitely. Right. Okay. We need to start thinking about wrapping up.
Got a point there.
I was just going to say, one thing I've noticed for me is if I've been meeting somebody on virtual online and then I meet them face to face, the energy just explodes. Does that make sense? So if I see you and go, Kelly, you've got legs. Oh my God. That type of thing. And all of a sudden the connection you could just feel it connecting that I would not experience if I had a face-to-face networking and took somebody out for a one-to-one. So I really enjoy that process and that experience from that.
You know what? I agree with that.
But I will. We've had this conversation. That's interesting that you say that, Paula. But most of the time when we meet people that we've got to know online, personally, it makes no difference when I meet them in person.
Oh, really?
Like to the point where we've stopped saying, have we actually met before? Because I think in my brain, of course I've met you because I speak to you all the time online. Kelly, you're looking like you're sat on the fence.
No, because I'm really sat on the fence now, because I would have agreed with you, James, before Paula said that. But I know when I do get to meet Paula, that energy will be amazing. But maybe that's a connection of energy. Yeah. And I'm sat here thinking, Alice, have I actually met you in person before? I can't even remember. Yes, I have. But that's the way it should be, shouldn't it? But no, I actually do think I agree with you, Paul. I think when you've known somebody online for a long time and you've known them quite closely, I think that's the difference. When you've spoken to them very regularly and you speak to them every few weeks, and that can go on for years, I think when you do meet them, that's a friendship for life, isn't it? I think that's what we're
well, perhaps here's the point of the point to make in that context is then meeting people in person prerequisite to doing business with them?
No, not for me.
Because what you're saying, Paula, may be fundamentally right, and you may enjoy that relationship as it develops if you meet in person. I think it's just very important from the perspective of a online networker to say, that's great and it's a nice to have, but you don't have to do it in order to build relationships and do business. Is that fair?
No, but it's something like, having something in connection with. So if somebody's trying to get a meeting with me, and as soon as I say, oh, member of only, I'll be like, oh, right, okay, let's get you in the diary, rather than going, oh, no, wait 5 weeks. That makes sense. You've got that heart-to-heart connection. So if I saw Rachel, and I saw Rachel Mess I met the other week, and it's weird to have her online, that's all I've known, and then I meet her in Sainsbury's, and I'm like, oh, you've got legs. And you're 5'2", instead of 6 foot, that type of thing. It's like, oh, connection.
Yeah, added dimension, isn't it? That's definitely it. Yeah, I get that.
Right.
Yeah.
We do need to think about wrapping it up. Any final tips for networking online? I'll start with you, Alice. You got anything left for us?
Ooh. Well, I've shared this before and only, but it's still the magic thing that I do. So after an online networking meeting only, I always take a screenshot of the people that are there, and then I go and find them on LinkedIn and say, it was really nice to see you. 2 reasons for this. One is if you just use the sheet where you know the people that are meant to be attending, the trouble is, and I've had this myself back, is I've had messages saying it was great to see you this afternoon. I was like, I wasn't there, but thanks so much for noticing me. So I want to always make sure that the people that I actually saw are the people then that I'm connecting with, and it means straight away that that person will accept you into their network, which means good things for LinkedIn algorithm, but also obviously just for relationship building. If you've just met somebody, hopefully had a conversation, hopefully made a good impression, you want to keep that conversation going immediately, not a week after when you finally remember to get round to doing something to do with networking. Doing it right then and there. So I just always leave myself an extra 5 minutes after an only meeting and then do that little bit of follow-up, and then I know I've captured all those people.
Just sets that process in motion, doesn't it? Fantastic. Thank you, Alice. Paula, you got any final networking tips for us?
How can you beat that one? That is absolutely crap. That's supersonic, isn't it? So the only thing I would say is pick out the top 20% of people that you genuinely get on with. They're your tribe. And take it out of the room by contacting them straight away, like Alice says, using LinkedIn, messaging, or however you do it. But pick up one thing that really stood out to you, that really like you could connect with, and mention that in the message.
I don't know. I think that was the equal of Alice's tip. That's very good.
No one could be Alice.
What I hear in that is that you're not going to be best friends with everyone you meet at networking. It is about breaking it down into something that's manageable and useful for you. So I think that's a great exercise. And that one thing that stood out for you from that person, I think that's powerful too. So thank you. Any final points, Kelly?
I think to combine all these two ladies' tips, no, that's a yes. Alice is right. Nothing worse than somebody saying it was good to see you when you weren't there. But reach out to the people that weren't there and say, I'm sorry I didn't see you. It would have been lovely to have caught up. Would you mind if we connect? Because we've all been in that space. We've not been able to go for the meeting for whatever reason. Then we feel awkward about going back because we didn't show up and we maybe didn't send apologies. So you will stand out as an amazing networker if you reach out to particularly a visitor that comes along to your group and hasn't been able to come along to your group, and you just send a nice message to acknowledge it.
Love it. Good tips.
That's a
all
supersonic
around.
one.
There you go.
Supersonic. Good word of the day. That's what we like.
Yeah.
Thank you. We need to end this show. Thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you to Alice, Paula, Kelly, of course. Happy birthday to me. I'm going to go back now. Happy networking. Thank you to Pipedrive as well. You guys, huge support. And do sign up. That's a fantastic opportunity to trial and stitch all this stuff together. Use technology. Don't use a bit of paper. Use a good bit of technology. So this has been Adventures in Networking, and we'll see you again next month. Goodbye.
Okay, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
What happened?